I'm humbled to be able to sit here this evening and to have this conversation with you all. And I have no idea how I got here, these brilliant folks up here, other than I am a mom. And about a decade ago, discovered that public education was actually governed by moms and dads. I want to thank CCU, the Centennial Institute, and Jeff for having this conversation tonight, and I want to thank you all for being here to have this very important conversation. Many of you know that I am the daughter of a public school teacher. My mom taught in inner city Cincinnati for most of her 30 years, and so from a very tiny age, I learned a couple of things about public education. First and foremost, it was ingrained to me, as Dr. Shuffle said, that if we don't have a publicly funded education system that provides equitable education, we don't have a republic. I make this correction to folks, including adults, all the time. We do not live in a democracy, we live in a republic. And the reason that that's thank you very much. And the reason that's incredibly important to me is because people need to be able to read their ballots and do their homework and know how to vote, because we don't all get together in the town square and figure out who has the most little votes. We all vote on who represents us. Jeff mentioned House Bill 1032. I hope we come back to that later on in this discussion, because things pass through the Golden Dome and we need to know about what they're doing. So I am the daughter of a public school teacher, and I do believe that publicly funded and publicly run education is critical, when successful, to continuing our republic. How many of you all went to public schools? All right, good. How many of you send your children or grandchildren to public schools? Okay, now that's a smaller number. That's interesting. I think we need to start this discussion. Let me ask where we're from. How many of you all are from Jeffco? How many of you live in Jeffco? Okay, Adams, Douglas County, Denver, somewhere else. Arapahoe? Okay, good, thank you. Yes, good job. I feel like I'm at the Western Conservative Summit. Where are we from? If you haven't gotten your tickets to that, do that. Sorry. I think we need to start with a conversation about what is the purpose of public education. And, you know, it's interesting to me that you can find bright people to have discussions about this. For me, and I think Dr. Shuffle said this well, it's to create a common culture. One of the things that I think is most interesting, if you've had an opportunity to travel in Canada, Canada is also a country of immigrants, and they do not espouse to the melting pot theory that we have in the United States. So one of the things about public education for me is creating that common culture, and I do think that that has something to do with the values that we hold. But I think in the environment that we live in today, it's very important that we are cautious about expecting our publicly run schools, both run by parents and not, to be the conveyors of the values. For me, that's a parent's role. And when parents are in charge of that public education, it works well. When they're not, we get this story that I was told a couple of weeks ago. An opportunity to talk to a mom who told me about her 16-year-old coming home one day from school, who said to her, "Mom, life begins when a child is born." Now, this is a Catholic mom, and you might imagine, being here in this Christian university, that did not sit well with that Catholic mom. But that was a 16-year-old. And so as Jeff asked me to think about what are some of the challenges of our publicly run schools in the state of Colorado, I think the first is that we don't really know how bad it is for a very long time, right? Whether it's your 16-year-old who comes home with morals that you did not instill in them, or it's your 16 or 17-year-old taking an ACT or an SAT to go off to college. I think for many of us, if our children are in public schools, we face what my mother, the English teacher, her $5 word, cognitive dissonance, right? We drive our children or our grandchildren to school, or we support our children who send our grandchildren to public school. And it's impossible to believe that we do that, and that we send them to something that's less than excellent, right? Does anybody in this room want something less than excellent for your children or your grandchildren? Anybody? Okay, So if we want the very, very best for our children and our grandchildren, to understand that 50% of our third graders don't read at grade level. Now, we can fight all day about whether the tests are measuring what we want them to do, but I want you to quickly look at your neighbor and figure out which one of the two of you, if you were in third grade, won't read. I'm not kidding. Which one of the two of you? And if both of you, as third graders, read proficiently, think about other audiences. If all of you are the third graders in a school and you're all reading at grade level, and yet in Colorado, 1 in 2 do not, think of other audiences where that means every single person in that audience didn't read well as a third grader. Why is that important? Because if you get to fourth grade and you're not reading at grade level, you cannot assimilate the material. And if you don't have an excellent, and I mean excellent teacher, you're not going to get caught up. Now I want you to think about your favorite 7-year-old, 6-year-old. Those are third graders. And by that time, in our publicly run education, we have put those children on a path. I don't care how much we believe or not believe that we're not Germany and we don't track kids. The reality is if you're coming out of third grade and you don't read proficiently, what are your future success possibilities? So for me, the challenges are, number one, we don't know how bad it is. And even when we know how bad it is, sometimes we're not willing to admit that to ourselves. Secondly, we don't know who's in charge. Right? Dr. Scheffel talked a lot about the bureaucracy. In our public education system in Colorado, I think Derek mentioned 200 schools. I think it's around that, 178 different school systems, 179 if you count the Charter School Institute. Who runs those? Because the honest truth is, everyday people, I want you to look at that person that you came with again. One of the two of you could be on a school board, whether that's a charter school or a school district. One of the two of you could be on a charter school board or on a school board because they are run by folks just like you and I. So do we know who's in charge? And then finally, do we know what to do about this? If you're passionate, and I assume you are, or you wouldn't be here on a Monday night, if you're passionate about this, what do you do about it? You know, my grandmother used to say all the time when I would say to her, Grandma, I just don't know what to do. She would say, Laura Beth, because of course grandmas always call you by 2 names, right? Laura Beth, you can't eat an elephant unless you start with 1 bite. So I will say to you all, you can't eat this elephant unless you start with 1 bite. Whatever you are called to do, that is what you must do. But you must walk out of here this evening with a commitment to do something to help us improve the equitable access of public education in the state of Colorado, because if we don't, we will pay for it one way or another.
Thank you, Laura.